Okay, this is Jody Barrett, Out the Box Mind Body Studio, and I have a yoga tip for you. It's actually a movement tip, but I'm going to give it to you in yoga language. So we have our pelvis here, and I'm going to pick it up, my little model here, to kind of give you guys a visual. So this is a smaller version of the pelvis, but the nice model. And I'm just going to turn it to the side, and you're going to notice this is where the leg bone goes in. This is the acetabulum. And it's got bone at the top, bone at the bottom, bone at the back. But here in the front, there's an opening. Same on both sides, obviously. And if you notice the structure of the pelvis, this is the back of the pelvis. It's got bone here. It's got bone here. In the front, there's an opening. So this means that to find mobility, to find the movement that we're wanting in our yoga poses and other movements in life, we have to be able to come through the front. We have to be at the midline of the body. That's where the opening is. So when the femur is here, wants to go through any sort of range of motion, it needs to come through the midline to get there. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a demonstration of what I mean. So the feet are underneath the pelvis, big toes touching, heels slightly apart. Make sure the knees are not locked. From the side, it's going to be right here. So we have a little bit of a hip hinge. So we've already made some space. So if you or your students are here, you're pushing the heads of the femurs forward, which makes the space disappear. So you're just going to take your hands, bring it back. That seems to be a really good cue for yoga students as well. You should feel the abdominals tone. Knees don't lock. If you feel like, whoa, this is really unstable, or if your students feel like it's really unstable, you can let them have the feet a little bit wider, but tell them that the reason we come together is to make the abs work. So eventually, the goal is to bring the feet together. So I'm going to give a demo of pigeon pose, and this is one that we played with this week in class. So if you came to class, you played with it. So big toes together, heels slightly apart, hinge back. I've got an opening. So I'm going to pick up my left leg, and I'm going to come through the midline. So I'm going to use those inner thighs. I'm going to come up through the midline, and then I'm going to externally rotate. So I've let the head of the femur stay in its socket. So once I'm here, it's still hinged back. Then I'm going to think about the other side, hinge it back, and sit back into your chair, your one-legged chair pose, and then of course hands can come here. Leaving is just as important. So as you rise, you're going to unhip hinge, but you're not going to push the head of the femur forward. You're going to bring the leg up, it's to the midline, and bring it back down. And obviously you can do it on both sides. So if you come up to do pigeon, and I'll do the misalignment on the other side. So if we're here and we come up and open, I jammed up into my bony parts of my hip. So there's not really any place for the hip to go. Most people, not all, but most people will then start to borrow movement from their low back. So we don't want to borrow movement from here, and we don't want to borrow movement from our knees, and we don't want to borrow movement from the ankles. We really want it to stay at the hips. And that's the way the hip is going to get stronger. So again, I'll go through one more time. Big toes together, heels slightly apart. From the side, it's going to look like this. Sometimes people are like, I'm way too far forward. They can bring the torso up, and then the rib cage stays down. So I've got a little bit of an in curve. That's a good thing. Everybody's in curve is a little different. I always hesitate to tell people what the in curve should look like. It's better for them to touch and feel. Make sure you have a little bit of a groove back there. You don't feel your bones poking out, or it doesn't feel flat and hard. And then from here, hinge back a little bit. You've created an opening. I'm going to do it on the other side. So you're going to trace the midline. For piriformis to really get what it needs to be 90 degrees. So I like shoot for belly button. Cross it over. It's still in its socket. Opposite leg starts to pick up the workload, and you're going to sit back. The other thing that I have really found is that if you have somebody who comes to this pose and they sit back and the knee goes up, the problem's not this leg. The problem's the opposite leg. So what you have to do is sit back into this opposite butt cheek. And that's what's going to let the leg come open. So I'll do it from the front so you can see. So we come up and through. Once I sit back, if I feel this leg's coming up, I need to let the other side sit back, and that's going to let this leg drop down without me pushing and forcing on it. It will just open. And there we are. And dismount, you guys all know me, hear me say that in class when you come to class. Dismount's important, so leaving, just as important as getting there. We get to do it in reverse. So that is coming into an external rotation pose in standing with the concept of the opening for the pelvis is at the midline, and that's really where we want to be trying to access movement from. I hope you guys have a great day. Play with it. Let me know what you think.